The champagne flute fell from my son-in-law's grasp the instant he collapsed. Etienne's father, Léon, was spasming on my sleek kitchen tiles, froth pooling at his lips. My only thought was, that wasn't meant for him. If you're watching, hit subscribe and tell me where you're tuning in from. Let me set one thing straight before I explain how this unfolded. I've lived 65 years and didn't thrive in a brutal business world by being naive. When someone tries to poison you at your own retirement celebration, you notice, especially when they've been coveting your fortune, like a ravenous vulture eyeing a banquet. 2 hours prior, my kitchen brimmed with chatter and clinking glasses. I'd just sold my consulting business for $50 million, a fine reward for an empire I built from scratch after losing my husband 15 years ago. "Maman," my daughter Amélie had said, pushing for this party. "You've earned this moment," she'd urged, her earnest hazel eyes gleaming. "Let Etienne take charge." Just unwind and enjoy, I should have sensed trouble when Etienne eagerly took on the host role. The man who griped about washing dishes was suddenly a paragon of hospitality, fussing over floral arrangements and shining glassware as if his fate hinged on it, which, it seems, it might have. The event was splendid, I'll admit. Roughly 30 guests, colleagues, neighbors, a few relatives, filled the space. Etienne even hired a bartender. "Only the best for you, Margot," he'd cooed, gripping my arm with fingers sporting a watch worth more than most people's weekly pay. I was exchanging pleasantries with my old business associate when I caught it. Etienne, lingering by the champagne station, darting nervous glances before slipping a tiny vial from his jacket. My pulse froze as he poured its contents into a specific flute, the one with the slight nick I always used at gatherings. A rational person might have shouted, summoned the police, or challenged him then and there. But I've learned the best way to snare a predator is to let it believe it's outwitted its prey. So I smiled, murmured agreement to my associate's talk of market shifts, and kept my eyes on Etienne. He approached with the tainted flute, his face a picture of filial care. "Margot, you seem weary," he said, offering it. "Have some champagne." "You deserve it." I accepted with warm thanks and bided my time. 10 minutes later, as he flaunted his new cufflinks to neighbors, I discreetly swapped my flute with his father Léon's, who stood nearby looking aimless without a drink. Léon was always a touch absent-minded, poor soul. He snatched the nearest glass, mine, now by his coat, without a thought. Within minutes, he was praising the champagne's odd zest, asking if I had sourced it from some elite vineyard. What followed came fast. I crouched beside Léon as Etienne yelled for someone to dial 911, his act of horrified shock nearly believable. Nearly. The trouble with playing assassin is that real fear and feigned fear are starkly different when you know the signs. "What happened?" Amélie demanded, weaving through the small crowd that had gathered. Her face was ghostly, but I caught a fleeting look. She shot Etienne, lingering just a moment too long. "I don't know," Etienne choked, gripping my arm as he wept. He just dropped. 1 second, fine, the next. He gestured helplessly at his father, unconscious but breathing, thank heavens. Paramedics arrived swiftly. As they loaded Léon onto a stretcher, I studied Amélie's face. 3 decades of motherhood had taught me to read her like a storm forecast. She looked like someone watching her meticulous plan unravel. "Which hospital?" I asked the lead paramedic. "Saint. Joseph's. You family?" "Close friend," I replied, glancing at Etienne, too frantic to notice. "I'll drive over." Amélie stepped in fast. "Maman, stay here. We'll manage. Tidy up from the party." How kind. Keep the target home while they sorted their failed scheme. Nonsense, I said firmly. Leon's practically family. I'm coming. I grabbed my purse and keys before objections could arise. At the hospital, I lingered near enough to catch the staff's murmurs. Leon's condition was acute poisoning, cause unclear. The doctor mentioned plant toxins to a nurse, precise enough to suggest someone had studied untraceable poisons. Etienne passed the waiting room, his polished shoes tapping the linoleum like a ticking clock, measuring his unease. Amélie sat stiff in a plastic chair, her phone buzzing with texts she seemed loath to answer. "This is awful," Etienne said for the 5th time. "Poor Papa." I can't grasp how this happened. I patted his shoulder gently. "Sometimes these things are mysteries, dear. The doctors will sort it out." Then offhandedly I added, "Lucky he only sipped that champagne before collapsing." Etienne's stride hitched, barely noticeable. "Champagne? You think that caused it?" "Oh, probably nothing," I said, waving it off. "Just an old woman seeing patterns where none exist." But his face paled, hands shaking slightly as he reached for his coffee. Amélie watched us with a hawk's intensity. 3 hours later, a doctor reported Leon was stable, but needed overnight monitoring. "Tests were inconclusive," he said, "but whatever he ingested is gradually leaving his system." "Can we see him?" Etienne asked. "Family only, and he's sedated. Come back tomorrow." As we left, Amélie walked me to my car. "Maman, stay with us tonight. After this, I'd feel better if you weren't alone." How thoughtful, especially since Leon's emergency likely had them wondering if I suspected anything. I did. Absolutely. But they didn't need to know yet. "That's kind, dear, but I'll be fine. I've got that new security system, remember?" I kissed her cheek and slid into my car, watching in the rear view as she and Etienne shared what seemed an urgent, hushed exchange in the parking lot. At home, I poured a fresh glass of champagne, untouched bottle, of course, and settled into my study. Time to unravel what my dear family had schemed, and more crucially, what I'd do about it. I spent the night doing what I'd mastered over 40 years in business: research. Not with computers or databases, but with a sharp memory and a wary mind. Leon's poisoning was no accident, no random mishap. Someone meant to kill me at my own celebration, likely hoping it'd pass as a heart attack or stroke. At 65, such things happen. Nobody questions a successful woman's heart failing amid the stress of selling her life's work. But why? That was the $50 million question, wasn't it? At 5 a.m., I brewed coffee and sat at my kitchen table with a notepad, jotting everything I knew about Amélie and Etienne's finances. It was grim. Amélie's architectural firm had floundered since the recession, and Etienne's jewelry venture was more pastime than profit. They lived extravagantly, far beyond their means. Their mortgage on that absurd Westfield house was triple what they could afford. The BMW and Mercedes in their driveway were financed. Etienne's shopping sprees could bankroll a small nation's schools. I'd helped, naturally. What mother wouldn't? A few thousand here and there when Amélie hinted at tight months. The down payment on their house when Etienne teared up about raising a family in the right area. Private school fees for their daughter when they deemed public schools inferior. My checkbook showed nearly $200,000 given over 5 years. Gifts, I'd called them. Investments in their joy. Never loans. That'd be crass. But now I wondered if they saw those gifts as something else. Early payouts on an inheritance they were eager to claim. At 7:30, the phone rang. Etienne checking in. "Margot, I couldn't sleep worrying about you," he said, voice thick with concern. "After what happened to Papa, I'm scared something was off with the food or drinks. You're feeling okay, right? So considerate, ensuring his poison hadn't hit its mark. I'm fine, dear. Any news on Leon? Doctors say he can go home today. Probably ate something bad before the party. You know how he is with his meds. Likely took them on an empty stomach. Leon Dubois was many things, but sloppy with medication wasn't one. The man managed his pills like a general with labeled cases and phone alerts. Such a relief, I said. I worried it might have been something from the party. That'd be awful. No, definitely not, Etienne replied swiftly. Doctors ruled out food poisoning. Just one of those things curious how fast he dismissed scrutiny of my party's fare, as if fearing someone might test the leftover champagne. After hanging up, I eyed the bottle Etienne had opened, 3/4 full, sitting innocently on my counter. What would a lab find if I sent it in? I didn't need proof for myself, I knew what I saw, but evidence might prove handy later. At 9 o'clock, my doorbell chimed. Amélie stood on my porch with pastries from my favorite bakery, the picture of a doting daughter. Thought you'd like breakfast, she said, kissing my cheek. You probably didn't eat much after yesterday's chaos. I let her in, brewed fresh coffee, and watched her arrange the pastries. As she moved through my kitchen, opening familiar cupboards, grabbing sugar without asking, a quiet sadness settled over me. This was still my little girl, the one who used to bring me daisies and proudly pin her kindergarten drawings to my fridge. When had that child become a woman who stood by while her husband tried to murder her mother? How are you holding up, Maman? Amélie asked, settling across from me at the breakfast table. Oh, you know me. It takes more than a bit of drama to shake these old bones. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. That's what worries me. An odd thing to say. I sipped my coffee and waited. The thing is, Amélie continued, picking at a croissant, Etienne and I have been discussing your situation. My situation? You're 65, Maman. Living alone in this big house, all that money from the sale? She gestured vaguely. It just feels like a lot for one person to handle. There it was, the opening for whatever they had planned next. I appreciate your concern, dear, I said, keeping my tone light. But I've managed quite well so far. Amélie leaned forward, her expression earnest. Have you, though? I mean, yesterday's incident with Léon. What if that had been you? What if you'd collapsed, and no one found you for hours? The nerve was astounding. Using their botched murder attempt to argue, I needed their protection. Amélie, Léon collapsed at a party with 30 witnesses, and paramedics arrived in minutes. Hardly a warning about living alone. That's not what I meant. She ran her hands through her hair, a gesture I recalled from her teenage years when she was about to ask for something she knew I'd refuse. Look, Etienne and I have been looking into options. There are wonderful communities for active seniors, places with people around, activities, medical staff on site. Ah, the nursing home pitch. How convenient they'd already been researching. How thoughtful, I said. And I suppose you found something specific. Actually, yes. She pulled out her phone, showing me a polished website for Soleil Haven, just 20 minutes from their house. We could visit all the time. They have a tennis court, a spa, cultural events. It's more like a resort than a retirement home. I scanned the images of serene, elderly folks playing chess and doing yoga. Likely sedated into compliance. The only thing is, Amélie continued, there's usually a wait list, but if someone wants to move in quickly, they'd need to pay the full entrance fee up front. It's steep, about $400,000, but it covers everything: housing, meals, lifelong care. $400,000. a nice chunk of my liquid assets. Once I was tucked away in Soleil Haven, who'd control the remaining $50 million? Who'd decide my care and finances? It sounds lovely, I said. But I'm happy here. This house holds so many memories of your father. Maman, Papa's been gone 15 years. Isn't it time for a new chapter? Her gentle concern stung. If I hadn't seen what I saw last night, I might have bought her worry. A daughter caring for her aging mother. It could have been touching. Instead, it was chilling. I'll think about it, I said finally. It's a big decision. Amélie's relief was palpable. Of course. Take your time. Maybe we could visit next week just to see it. Maybe. I stood, clearing the dishes. I should call Léon today, check how he's doing. Actually, Maman, Amélie said quickly, Etienne mentioned Léon needs rest for a few days. The doctor said visitors might be too much while he recovers. How convenient. Keep me from the victim until the poison's out of his system and his memory's foggy. After Amélie left, I sat in my study, mulling timing. They'd waited until after I sold the company to act. Clever. If I'd died 6 months ago, my $50 million would have gone to Amélie, per my will. But as a living gift, it'd face different taxes. Killing me now, especially if they could fabricate signs of mental decline, would let them contest any recent estate changes. The phone rang. My attorney, Julien Lefebvre, returning my earlier call. Margot, good to hear from you. How was the retirement party? Eventful, I said. Julien, I need to see you soon. Is everything okay? I gazed at the garden my husband planted 20 years ago, roses thriving despite only an old woman's care, apparently too frail to manage her own life. I'm not sure, I said, but I'm about to find out. Julien Lefebvre had been my attorney for 20 years, guiding me through my husband's death, my business's growth, and every major choice since. A lean, meticulous man who kept his emotions in check. Julien was the ideal lawyer when you suspected your family was plotting your demise. His office, perched on the 15th floor overlooking downtown, exuded assurance with its dark wood, leather chairs, and faint scent of fine cologne. I always felt secure here, surrounded by legal tomes. Tell me everything, Julien said, after his assistant brought coffee and shut the door. I recounted every detail, Léon's collapse, Amélie's visit this morning. Julien listened silently, jotting notes on his pad. You're certain of what you saw? He asked when I finished. As certain as I am of sitting here. Julien leaned back, tapping his pen against his lips. Proving intent is the issue. Etienne could claim he was adding something benign to the champagne, a supplement, a flavoring. Without testing the remaining champagne, we lack evidence of attempted murder. Then let's test it. If we find poison, we'd have proof of attempted murder, but not necessarily that you were the target. He could claim he meant to harm his father for insurance or someone else entirely. I hadn't considered that. Even with proof, they might dodge a murder charge. There's another issue, Julien said, his tone grave. If they're willing to kill for your money, they might try subtler methods first, like challenging your competency. On what grounds? My age? Living alone? The stress of the sale? Exactly. If they establish a pattern of impaired judgment, they could seek guardianship. Once they control you, they control your assets. The nursing home suggestion clicked into place. Sequester me where professionals could document confusion or dementia, especially if well paid. What do I do? Julien pulled a thick folder from his desk. First, we document your mental clarity. I'll arrange an evaluation by a geriatric psychiatrist specializing in competency assessments for older clients. Get that recorded now. Then we get strategic with your estate. His smile was sharp. If Amélie and Etienne want to play games with your money, we'll ensure they play by your rules. We spent 2 hours reviewing options, trust structures to block challenges, medical directives naming who could and couldn't, decide my care, financial, safeguards triggering audits if anyone tried accessing my accounts without approval. One more thing, Julienne said as I prepared to leave. Given last night, consider your personal safety. If they tried once, they'll try again, more carefully. I recalled Amélie's offer to stay with them. How easy it would have been. A grieving widow, shaken by a friend's illness, taking a sedative to sleep. So simple for an elderly woman to accidentally overdose. What do you suggest? Security systems to start, cameras, motion sensors, a panic button setup. I can recommend a firm that specializes in protecting high net worth individuals, Julian said. High net worth individual. That's what I'd become, apparently, rich enough to be a target. Driving home, I scrutinized every car in my rearview mirror, wondering if I was being tailed. Paranoia, perhaps. But as my husband used to say, it's not paranoia if they're truly after you. My phone rang as I pulled into my garage. Etienne, his voice brimming with forced cheer. Margot, just wanted to let you know Papa's home from the hospital. He's doing much better, though he doesn't recall much from last night. The doctor said that's normal for this kind of episode. How perfectly convenient. I'm so glad he's okay, I replied. I'd love to visit him tomorrow. Oh, he's not up for visitors yet, Etienne said quickly. Maybe in a few days. I'll let you know. Of course, dear. Tell him I'm thinking of him. After hanging up, I sat in my car, staring at the house I'd called home for 30 years. My husband and I bought it when Amélie was 10, dreaming of family gatherings and holiday feasts. The mortgage stretched us thin back then, but we were young, hopeful, certain it would all work out. Now it felt like a castle under siege. But I'd learned in business that the best defense is often a strong offense. Time to show my family what a 65-year-old woman could do. The security company arrived at 8 a.m. 3 technicians in plain vans spent the day installing cameras, motion detectors, and a panic button system that could summon police in under 3 minutes. I told neighbors it was due to package theft, a plausible excuse for any suburban street. By afternoon, my home was more secure than a bank vault, but true protection came in an envelope delivered by Julienne's courier at 2 p.m. My updated will, trust documents, and medical directives, all notarized and witnessed. If Amélie and Etienne wanted my money, they'd have to wait, and they'd get far less than they hoped. The new will slashed Amélie's inheritance from everything to a modest trust, paying $50,000 annually. Enough for comfort, not their lavish lifestyle. The bulk of my estate would fund cancer research, with smaller sums to charities I'd long supported. Etienne. Not a cent. I'd never warmed to him but tolerated him for Amélie's sake. Attempted murder, however, was my line in the sand. I was reviewing the documents one last time when the doorbell rang. The security monitor showed Amélie and Etienne on my porch, both looking tense. Maman, we need to talk, Amélie said as I opened the door. Of course, dear. Come in. They sat in my living room, Etienne perched on the sofa's edge like he might bolt. Amélie's gaze lingered on the new security camera in the corner. New camera? She asked. Package theft, I said smoothly. You can't be too careful these days. Etienne cleared his throat. Margot, we've been thinking about what happened with Papa's incident. Yes, Amélie chimed in, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. We feel awful about hosting the party here. If something we brought made him sick. Her voice trailed off. A rehearsed performance I admired for its polish. I'm sure it wasn't anything you brought, dear, I said. But what if it was? Amélie leaned forward. What if the champagne or food was off? Maman, I'd never forgive myself if we'd put you at risk. Here it came, the setup for their next move. The thing is, Etienne added, we think it'd be better if we looked after you for a while. Just until we're sure you're safe. Looked after me? How? You could stay with us, Amélie said. Just temporarily, until we figure out what happened. I let the silence hang, studying their faces. Amélie seemed genuinely concerned. She'd always been good at convincing herself her motives were pure. Etienne looked like a man with an overdue mortgage. That's very thoughtful, I said, finally, but I'm perfectly safe here. Are you, though? Etienne's voice sharpened. You're 65, Margot, living alone. What if something happens and no one finds you for days? Amélie nodded. What if you fall or have a heart attack? At your age, anything could happen. At my age. As if 65 meant I was already half in the grave. You're right, I said thoughtfully. Anything could happen at my age. That's why I spent today updating my will. The room's temperature seemed to plummet. Your will? Etienne's tone was carefully neutral. Oh, yes. A brush with someone else's mortality makes you reflect. My old will was outdated, so I made some changes to match my current priorities. Amélie paled. What kind of changes? I gave her the smile I used when she was 8, caught lying about breaking my favorite lamp. Just minor tweaks to reflect what matters now. You know how these things are. The silence was heavy, their minds clearly racing to gauge how their plans had been derailed. Well, Etienne said tightly, I'm sure whatever you decided is for the best. I think so too, dear. They left soon after, promising to check in. From my security monitor, I watched them sit in their car in my driveway for 10 minutes, engaged in a heated discussion. Etienne made a call, gesturing angrily while Amélie tried to grab the phone, only for him to push her hand away. When they finally drove off, I poured a glass of wine and sank into my favorite chair. Tomorrow, I'd launch the next phase of my plan, but tonight I'd savor the first calm evening in days. There's a deep satisfaction in watching your adversaries realize they've underestimated you. The game was just starting, and I'd been playing it far longer than they had. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Léon Dubois stood on my doorstep, pale but resolute, clutching his wallet like an anchor. Margot, I need to talk, he said, without preamble. It's about the other night. I invited him in, brewed tea, and studied his face for signs of the poisoning. He looked weary but sharp, far more lucid than Etienne would have wanted me to believe. Etienne told me it was a reaction to medication, Léon said, settling into my armchair. But Margot, I don't take any meds except vitamins. Haven't for years. Interesting. What do you remember about the party? I asked Léon, pouring tea as we sat in my living room. Everything until I got dizzy, he replied, his voice steady but strained. The champagne tasted off, bitter, almost metallic. I saw Etienne near the drink table earlier, fiddling with a small bottle. My heart raced. What kind of bottle? Like a dropper, the sort for essential oils or other things. Léon's hands trembled as he set down his teacup. Margot, I think my son tried to poison you. Why would you think that? His laugh was sharp, bitter. He's been obsessing over your money for months. Complaining it's unfair you have so much while they struggle. How their lives would be easier if something happened to you. The puzzle pieces snapped together. Has he said anything specific? Last month he asked if I thought you'd updated your will lately. He was very focused on Amélie's inheritance. Léon met my gaze. Margot, I think they've been plotting this for a while. I made a choice. Léon deserved the truth, and I needed an ally who'd seen their behavior up close. Léon, I saw Etienne put something in my champagne flute. I swapped our drinks on purpose. His face drained of color. He tried to kill you, and I nearly died instead. Yes. We sat in heavy silence, grappling with the weight of it. What are you going to do? Léon asked finally. I'm going to give them what they want, I said. Just not how they expect. Léon raised an eyebrow. What does that mean? It means your son and my daughter are about to learn some games have higher stakes than they thought. After Léon left, I called an old business contact, Claudine Moreau, who ran a private investigation firm specializing in corporate espionage and background checks. We'd collaborated before when I needed dirt on potential partners. Margot Vasseur, Claudine's voice warmed through the phone. Heard about your sale. Congratulations. Thank you, Claudine. I need a favor. A personal one. What kind? I need everything on my daughter's finances. Bank accounts, credit cards, loans, investments, the lot. A pause. Margot, you sure? Family secrets can sting, I'm sure. Give me 48 hours. While Claudine worked, I moved to the next step. I called Amélie and invited her to lunch at our old haunt, where we'd celebrated her architecture degree, her wedding, her daughter's birth. She arrived looking jittery, checking her phone constantly. You okay, maman? You sounded shaken on the phone. I've been thinking about what you and Etienne said about my safety, my future, I said. Her face lit up. And I think you're right. It's time for changes. Amélie leaned forward, eager. What kind? I looked into Soleil Haven, the place you mentioned. Called them this morning. That's great, maman. I think you'll love it there. They have an opening, but it's got to be filled fast. Someone else is eyeing the same unit. How fast? Next week. I'd need to pay the entrance fee by Friday to lock it in. Amélie's excitement was electric. That's no issue, right? You've got the money from the sale. Of course. It's just a big leap. I thought you and Etienne could help with the paperwork. Make sure I'm choosing wisely. Absolutely. We'd love to help. I smiled at my daughter, memorizing her expression. Soon, that eagerness would shift to something else entirely. One thing, I added casually, the facility requires a power of attorney on file, someone to make decisions if I can't. I was hoping you'd take that on, of course, maman. Whatever you need. Perfect. Amélie thought she was steering me toward handing her my fortune. Instead, she was stepping into my trap. Claudine called Thursday morning with her report. I listened, stunned, as she laid out Amélie and Etienne's finances. They're drowning, she said. The house has been refinanced 3 times. 2 mortgages plus a maxed-out home equity line. Credit card debt over $80,000. How are they making payments? Barely. Amélie's firm has been losing money for 2 years. They're juggling credit cards to pay other cards. Classic desperation. Anything else? Etienne took out a $500,000 life insurance policy on you 6 months ago, with himself as beneficiary. My blood chilled. How's that legal? He claimed insurable interest as your son-in-law and caregiver. The insurer likely assumed Amélie was the real beneficiary, with Etienne just handling paperwork. A life insurance policy. They'd been planning my death for months, not days. One more thing, Claudine added. Amélie's been paying a doctor. Philippe Renaud, a geriatric psychiatrist, regularly for 3 months. Small sums, like consultation fees, Dr. Philippe Renaud. I noted the name to ask Julienne about. That afternoon, Amélie and Etienne arrived with a briefcase stuffed with Soleil Haven paperwork. They spread it across my dining table like strategists plotting a campaign. "This is the admission contract," Etienne said, pointing to a hefty stack. "And this is the financial disclosure form, listing all your assets for their fee calculations." "Very thorough," I noted, skimming the papers. They'd want access to my accounts, investments, everything. "Here's the power of attorney," Amélie added, sliding a document toward me. "It's standard. Just gives me authority to manage your finances if you can't." I read it carefully. It was far broader than Amélie suggested, granting immediate access to my accounts, portfolios, and full financial decision-making power. "This seems quite extensive," I said. "Do I need to give you this much control?" "Maman, it's just a precaution," Amélie said. "The facility requires it. And honestly, at your age, it's smart to have someone younger handle the complex financial stuff." At my age, there it was again. "What if I change my mind about Soleil Haven?" "Can this be revoked?" They exchanged a quick glance. "Technically, yes," Etienne said. "But the facility has strict rules about residents leaving, medical evaluations, waiting periods. It's complicated." Of course. Once I signed and moved in, they'd control my money and could make leaving nearly impossible, especially with Dr. Philippe Renaud, ready to assess my mental state. "I need to think it over tonight," I said, gathering the papers. "It's a big step." Amélie's face fell. "Maman, we need to submit by tomorrow to secure the unit." "I understand. I'll have an answer by morning." After they left, I called Julien. "What can you tell me about Dr. Philippe Renaud?" "Renaud, geriatric psychiatrist, specializes in competency evaluations for elderly clients. Why?" "Amélie's been paying him for consultations," I told Julien. A long pause followed. "Renaud has a reputation for being accommodating to families worried about an elderly relative's judgment," Julien said. "His evaluations often align with whatever outcome the family wants." "You mean he'll declare someone incompetent for a price?" "I wouldn't say that officially, but I've seen cases where his reports helped families seize control of an elderly person's assets." The picture sharpened. Amélie and Etienne weren't just after my money. They'd crafted a meticulous plan. Move me into Soleil Haven under the pretext of care. Use the power of attorney to tap my accounts. If I resisted, have Dr. Renaud deem me unfit. It was cunning. If I hadn't seen Etienne tamper with the champagne, I might have fallen right into their scheme. "Julien, I need you to prepare something for me," I said, "and I need it by tomorrow morning." "What kind?" "The kind that'll teach my family a lesson they won't forget." That evening, I sat in my study, reviewing the plan. Every detail had to be flawless. Tomorrow, Amélie and Etienne would get what they deserved. But first, one more call. Friday morning dawned gray and drizzly, the perfect backdrop for what I had in store. Amélie and Etienne arrived at 9 a.m., dressed as if for a corporate deal, which, in a way, they were. "Have you decided, Maman?" Amélie asked, sitting in my living room, barely hiding her anticipation. "I have." I pulled out the Soleil Haven paperwork, signed and notarized. "You're right. It's time for a new chapter." Etienne's relief was obvious. "Oh, Margot, I'm so glad. You'll love it there, I'm sure I will. And Amélie, I've signed the power of attorney papers, too." Amélie's hands shook as she took the documents. "This is the right choice, Maman." "You won't regret it," I smiled. "I'm sure I won't." We spent the next hour reviewing financial forms. Etienne had a laptop open, typing furiously as I provided account numbers and codes. Every few minutes they exchanged glances, like kids thrilled Christmas came early. One more thing, I said when we finished. I need to sign additional papers with my attorney to finalize the transfer. Something about tax rules for large transactions. Of course, Amélie said. Want us to drive you to his office? No need. Julien's coming here. He should arrive soon. As if on cue, the doorbell rang. But it wasn't Julien Lefebvre on my porch. It was Detective Claire Dubois from the local police, with a colleague I didn't know. Miss Vasseur, she said. I'm Detective Dubois. We need to discuss an incident at your home earlier this week. Amélie stood quickly. What incident? A suspected poisoning, Detective Dubois said, her eyes shifting between Amélie and Etienne. We understand there was a medical emergency here during a party. Etienne paled. That was my father. He had a reaction to medication. The doctor said it wasn't serious. Actually, Ms. Vasseur, Detective Dubois said, pulling out a notebook. The hospital reported your father ingested a concentrated dose of oleander extract. That's not a medication. It's a deadly poison. The silence in my living room was suffocating. We also tested the remaining champagne from that evening, the detective continued. The bottle opened for the party contained oleander extract. Someone deliberately poisoned it. Amélie stared at Etienne, her face a mask of dawning horror. Etienne, what did you do? I didn't do anything. His voice was sharp with panic. This is insane. Why would I poison my own father? That's what we're investigating, Detective Dubois said. Especially since the flute with the highest poison concentration was meant for Miss. Vasseur Etienne looked like he might collapse. Amélie sank into her chair, ashen. There's more, I said quietly. Detective, show them the insurance policy. Detective Dubois nodded, producing a document. Mr. Dubois, we found you took out a $500,000 life insurance policy on Ms. Vasseur 6 months ago. That's a clear financial motive for murder. This is madness, Etienne whispered. Margot, tell them this is madness. I looked at my son-in-law, who'd feigned care while plotting my death. I saw you put the poison in my champagne flute, Etienne. I switched our drinks deliberately. Amélie's head snapped up. You knew? You knew he was trying to poison you? I've known for days. I also know about your finances, Doctor. Renaud, your plan to have me declared incompetent. I know everything. The power of attorney papers slipped from Amélie's fingers. Maman, I didn't know about the poison. I swear I didn't know he'd try to kill you. But you knew about the rest, didn't you? The nursing home, the power of attorney, the plan to take my money. Amélie's silence spoke volumes. Detective Dubois stepped forward. Etienne Dubois, you're under arrest for attempted murder. As they handcuffed Etienne, he turned to me, eyes blazing. You think you're so smart, don't you? You have no idea what you've done. Actually, I said, I know exactly what I've done. After the police left with Etienne, Amélie sat in my living room, stunned, staring at the scattered power of attorney papers. She ran her hands through her hair. He said it was about keeping you safe, she said finally. He said you were getting forgetful, making bad choices. He convinced me you needed protection, and the money was for that, too. Her face crumpled. We're in so much debt, Maman. The business is failing. We're behind on everything. Etienne said if something happened to you naturally, we'd inherit enough to start over. But he never mentioned. She gestured helplessly. Murder. You thought you were just preparing for the inevitable, setting things up for when I died naturally. Amélie's eyes filled with tears. How convenient that those natural causes needed a nudge. I'm so sorry, Maman, Amélie sobbed. I never meant to hurt you. I studied my daughter's face, searching for sincerity behind the tears. Part of me wanted to believe Etienne had manipulated her, but I'd been in business too long to miss warning signs. Amélie, show me your phone. What? Your phone. Show me your texts with Etienne from the past week. She hesitated, then handed it over reluctantly. I scrolled through their messages, my heart sinking with each one. Etienne. Did you talk to Maman about Soleil Haven? Amélie. Yes, she's considering it. Etienne. Good. The sooner she's moved, the better. She's asking too many questions about our finances. Amélie. What if she changes her mind? Etienne. She won't. Not after tomorrow night. Amélie. What's tomorrow night? Etienne. Trust me. By Sunday, she'll be begging us to take care of her. I handed the phone back. You knew, didn't you? Maybe not the exact plan, but you knew Etienne was scheming something for the party. Amélie's shoulders slumped. I thought he meant to scare you, maybe stage a break-in or an accident to make you feel unsafe living alone. You thought he was going to stage my attempted murder. Not murder, she said, voice shaking. Just something to convince you to move to Soleil Haven, willingly. Her casual tone chilled me. My own daughter was okay with terrifying me into submission. There's something else, Amélie, I said. I had a private investigator dig into your finances. Her face went pale. What did you find? Everything. The debt, the failing business, the fact you've been living way beyond your means. I pulled out Claudine's report, pointing to one detail. The payments to Doctor. Renaud caught my eye. Maman, I can explain. Can you? Because this shows you've been paying him to consult on my case for 3 months. Before you ever mentioned Soleil Haven. Before you claimed to worry about my mental state. What were you consulting him about? Amélie buried her face in her hands. Etienne said we needed a backup plan if you wouldn't sign the power of attorney willingly. Renaud agreed to evaluate you, find signs of dementia or incompetence. Etienne said it was just a precaution if you got stubborn, a cold weight settled in my chest. You planned to have me declared incompetent from the start. Only if needed, she mumbled. Only if you wouldn't let us help you. Help me what, Amélie? Hand over my money? The truth hung heavy between us. My daughter, the child I'd raised, loved, and sacrificed for, had plotted to strip my independence and steal my life's work. One more thing, I said softly. The power of attorney papers you signed today. Amélie looked up, hopeful. Yes? They're fake. Julienne drafted them for this meeting. They give you power over a bank account with exactly $1. She stared, stunned. What? My real money is locked in trusts you can't touch. The will you're so worried about leaves you a modest annual income, nothing more. And if you're convicted of conspiracy in Etienne's murder plot, even that vanishes. Amélie's face crumpled. You've ruined my life. No, Amélie, you ruined your own. I just made sure you couldn't ruin mine. As I watched my daughter sit there, broken, I felt no triumph, no satisfaction, just a deep, aching sadness for the person she'd become. 3 months later, I sat in my garden, watching the roses bloom, reflecting on endings and new beginnings. Etienne had been sentenced to 15 years for attempted murder. Amélie got 3 years for conspiracy, her lawyer arguing down the original charges. My granddaughter, Claire, called last night. At 16, she understood what her parents had done, horrified by their choices. Grandmère, Marco, I'm so sorry. she'd said, voice thick with tears. "I had no idea they were planning this." "I know, sweetheart." "It's not your fault. Can you visit this summer?" "I'd love to see you." "I'd love that," she'd said, and I meant it. Claire was innocent, a victim of her parents' greed as much as I was. Léon Dubois had become an unexpected ally. We met for coffee twice weekly, two survivors bonded by our family's betrayal. He was considering a book on elder abuse, using our story as a warning. "You know," Léon said at our last coffee, "I keep thinking how close they came to succeeding." "They never had a chance," I replied. "I've dealt with people after my money for 40 years. The only difference was they shared my blood." Léon chuckled. "Do you regret how it ended, with them in prison?" I pondered it. Amélie was my daughter, the child I'd cherished. But she was also a woman willing to destroy me for money. "I regret it was necessary," I said, "but not protecting myself." The doorbell broke my garden reverie. Through the security monitor, I saw Julien Lefebvre on my porch, briefcase in hand, looking unusually pleased. "Julien, what brings you?" "Good news," he said, settling in my living room. "The insurance company won't contest Etienne's policy on your life. Since he was convicted of attempting your murder, they're voiding it and refunding all premiums." "That's something, I suppose." "There's more. Amelie's creditors are seizing her assets to cover debts, including the house you helped them buy. They're asking if you want to make an offer. I pictured their house, granite counters, soaring ceilings, all the luxuries they craved. "No," I said. "Let someone else have it." "Someone who can afford it honestly." Julian nodded, pulling out a document. "Final item. Your trust restructuring is done. Your money is protected forever. No one can access it without your written consent. If anyone tries to declare you incompetent, the trust shifts to charity. Thank you, Julian, for everything." After he left, I poured a glass of wine and sat on my deck, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of gold and pink. At 65, I'd learned money reveals the best and worst in people. Sadly, it showed the worst in my family, but I'd also learned my own strength, sharp enough to see through their plot, tough enough to stop it, resilient enough to move forward without them. My phone buzzed with a text from Claire. "Grandmère, I got into Sorbonne pre-law, like you suggested. Can't wait to tell you about it when I visit." I smiled, replying, "Congratulations, sweetheart." "So proud of you." Maybe that was the true win. Not just foiling Amélie and Etienne's scheme, but ensuring the next generation could choose better. Claire would learn money is a tool, not a purpose. Family means love and support, not greed and betrayal. My garden's roses bloomed vibrantly, tended by a landscaping service I could easily afford. My home felt serene, guarded by security systems and legal safeguards that secured my independence. This story began with a failed poisoning at my retirement party, but it was really about the difference between being old and being powerless. At 65, I was far from powerless. Anyone who tested that would learn, as Amélie and Etienne did, that underestimating a sharp older woman is a costly mistake. Sometimes, the best revenge is living well, ensuring those who wronged you don't profit from their schemes. I'd done both and would sleep soundly, knowing it. At my age, a good night's sleep is worth more than all the money in the world. Having both was just a bonus.